In today's lesson, we're going to be looking at the ACT Aspire exemplar test items for the 8th grade reading exam. The first thing we need to do is to read the passage, and remember that on the ACT Aspire reading, your passages can be literary narratives, which include prose fiction, memoirs, personal essays, or it can be informational texts, which include social science and natural science. This passage is a social science passage. This passage is adapted from the article A Capital Capital by Gina DeAngelis. The U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., one of the most recognizable buildings in the world, has been the working site of the U.S. Congress for more than 200 years. In January 1791, French engineer Pierre L'Enfant was asked to design America's grand capital city. L'Enfant submitted his idea to commissioners in August. It included a grand vista about a mile long at one end, of which would be the city's Congress House. The U.S. government decided to hold a contest to find the best design for the new country's capital. The winner was a physician named William Thornton. Construction began in 1793 when President George Washington used a silver trowel to lay the cornerstone on Jenkins Hall, known today as Capitol Hill. It was hoped that Congress, which had been meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, could move in by the turn of the century. By 1796, though, construction already was behind schedule. Worried lawmakers decided to focus on completing the north wing of the Capitol, but parts of that still were unfinished in 1800. Both branches of Congress, the Supreme Court, the District of Columbia courts, and the Library of Congress moved in anyway. Congress authorized more money for the Capitol in 1803 and appointed architect Benjamin Latrobe to oversee construction. He had the south wing finished by 1811, but by then the north wing was in need of repair. The War of 1812, which lasted until 1815, intervened, and Congress refused to worry about the building project. A frustrated Latrobe resigned in 1813. In 1814, an invading British force set fire to the Capitol, the White House, and other government buildings. A timely rainstorm saved the city from complete destruction, but Congress was forced to meet for a time in a cramped hotel. From 1815 to 1819, the Senate and the House gathered in a brick structure where the Supreme Court building stands today. Congress begged the efficient Latrobe to return, which he did, until he resigned again in 1817. His replacement, Charles Bulfinch, designed a beautiful copper-covered dome for the central section of the Capitol. The building finally was completed in 1826. More than 30 years after construction began. Of course, by then, the United States had grown, so Congress again needed more space. After another competition to expand the Capitol in 1850 resulted in a 5-way tie. President Millard Fillmore chose Thomas U. Walter to supervise construction. Bulfinch's dome was dwarfed by the enormous new wings. So Walter came up with a design for a huge dome and displayed a drawing of it in his office. Congressmen who visited there were so impressed that in 1855 they voted to replace the original dome with Walter's grand design. Though the outbreak of the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, briefly interrupted construction, President Abraham Lincoln inaugurated in 1861 beneath the half-completed dome, refused to stop the project. In December 1863, the final section of the 19-foot-tall Statue of Freedom was hoisted into place. 3 years later, the building with its great domed rotunda that is so recognizable today was completed. Okay, so we're going to look at the first question from our passage, and it says, number 1, which of the following statements best describes the main purpose of the passage? And if you'll notice in this exercise, the correct answers are marked with a star beside them. So what we are going to do is look at why the other answers were incorrect. That way you can learn how to eliminate incorrect answers in order to come up with your correct answer. So we're going to skip A. We know it's our correct answer, and we're going to look at B. A said, to provide an overview of the stages through which the Capitol was designed and built. Remember, that's our correct answer. Why is B incorrect? To describe the places Congress met during times when the Capitol couldn't be used. Now, what I want to do is I want to go back and look at each paragraph and see overall what the main idea was in each paragraph. Starting with this one, I'm going to skip the introductory paragraph. In this paragraph, notice I see the word design. I'm going to switch my color to red. And then I also see the word design here. So I'm led to believe that this paragraph is primarily about construction. Remember, that was my correct answer, was talking about when it was designed and built. And I see design and design. Now in this next paragraph, I see the word construction, which has to do with building. And then in the following paragraph, I see construction again. And then the next paragraph, I see architect, construction, building, and in the next paragraph, when I read through it, I don't see a whole lot about construction, but I do see something about the Congress meeting, was forced to meet. Now, remember, choice B was to describe the places Congress met during the times when the Capitol couldn't be used. So I'm going to keep that in mind because it might be choice B. The next paragraph, I see designed, and then construction again. And then in the following paragraph, I see construction. And then design. Okay, so looking at your body paragraphs, all of them but one were about construction, building, and design. Only one was about meeting with the Congress. So I'm eliminating choice B. And I'm still leaning toward this designed and built. Remember, that was the main thing here. Choice C, to analyze the interactions between the people who designed the Capitol and those who built it. Now, if you go back and look, the names that we had were here. We had Thornton, who was the contest winner who designed things. And then L'Enfant was the one who designed the city. But they didn't interact. And in the next paragraph, we have President George Washington, but we don't see any interaction there. Next paragraph, it doesn't mention anyone. The next body paragraph, we have Benjamin Latrobe, but it's not mentioned that he interacted with any of the former people mentioned. Next paragraph, it doesn't mention any new architects, but then in this paragraph we see Charles Bulfinch, and it mentions Latrobe again, but it doesn't really say anything about them interacting. And then the last body paragraph, we have President Millard Fillmore. Thomas Walter was the new architect, but it does not mention that he spoke with Bulfinch. So I'm going to eliminate C as my possibility. Choice D, to argue for the continued restoration and maintenance of the Capitol. Okay, the only thing that really was pointed out in any of the body paragraphs about continuing the construction was in this last paragraph. Not that one, sorry. The last paragraph, where President Abraham Lincoln insisted that they not stop the project. So that's only in one paragraph. That can't be my main purpose. And now you're able to see that this passage is primarily about the Capitol being designed and built. And that is question 1 on the ACT Aspire Grade 8 Reading Exemplar Test. Okay, next we're going to look at question 2 of the ACT Aspire Grade 8 Reading Exemplar Text. And question 2 asks us to look at the passage suggests that compared to how much the War of 1812 slowed the construction of the Capitol, the Civil War slowed construction of the Capitol much less, to an equal degree, slightly more, or much more. So what I need to do is I need to look at my paragraph that includes the statement about the War of 1812, and then my paragraph that includes the statement about the Civil War. And we're trying to decide if it was, in fact, like the answer says, much less, or to an equal degree, or slightly more, or much more. Congress authorized more money for the Capitol in 1803 and appointed architect Benjamin Latrobe to oversee construction. He had the south wing finished by 1811, but by then the north wing was in need of repair. The War of 1812, which lasted until 1815, intervened, and Congress refused to worry about the building project. A frustrated Latrobe resigned in 1813. So it looks like it delayed it at least a year, but as much as 3 years in the War of 1812. Now down at the bottom it says, though the outbreak of the Civil War 1861 to 1865 briefly interrupted construction, President Abraham Lincoln, inaugurated in 1861 beneath the half-completed dome, refused to stop the project. So it was not to an equal degree, because 1812 was, like I said, between 1 to 3 years. It wasn't slightly more. 1 to 3 years is quite a large amount of time. And it wasn't much more, because what you got to remember here is this is slightly more, much more. It was much less. The Civil War did not interfere like the War of 1812. So that is why choice A is your correct answer. Okay, next we're going to look at question 3, which asks, the passage indicates that L'Enfant contributed to the U.S. capital city by designing the, and my choices were a general layout of the city, interior of the wings of the Capitol, structure of the first dome of the Capitol, the Supreme Court building. What I want to do is I want to look back in my passage and find the part where it speaks about L'Enfant, and I notice that that is in this paragraph, and I'm going to reread that to refresh my memory and see if it actually was general layout of the city. In January 1791, French engineer Pierre L'Enfant was asked to design America's grand capital city. L'Enfant submitted his idea to commissioners in August. So in fact, yes, it was the general layout of the city that L'Enfant was asked to contribute to. And that is the answer to question 3 on the ACT Aspire Reading 8th grade. Okay, now we're going to look at question 4 of the ACT Aspire 8th grade reading exam. It says, according to the passage, why did Walter design a new Capitol dome? And my choices are A, the original dome was disliked by several members of Congress. B, the size of the new wings of the Capitol made the original dome seem too small. C, the original dome had been damaged and had become a safety hazard. D, President Fillmore had asked Walter to design a new dome. Okay, so I want to go back and look at the part where it talks about the dome, and that is going to be in this paragraph. It says, another competition to expand the Capitol in 1850 resulted in a 5-way tie. President Millard Fillmore chose Thomas U. Walter to supervise construction. Bullfinch's dome was dwarfing by the enormous new wings. And there is my evidence that choice B, the size of the new wings of the Capitol, made the original dome seem too small. And that is the answer to number 4 on the ACT Aspire 8th grade reading exam. Okay, now we're ready for question 5 on the ACT Aspire 8th grade reading exam. The question says, the passage most strongly suggests that Latrobe resigned in 1813 from his duties overseeing construction of the Capitol because A, he wanted to find a new project since the construction was nearly complete, B, Bullfinch had been appointed to take over some of Latrobe's tasks, which made Latrobe angry, C, the British Army had damaged the Capitol, which led to work on it being stopped indefinitely, D, he was unhappy with Congress's lack of interest in the Capitol project during the war. Now looking back, I'm going to find where it speaks about why Latrobe resigned. And if you look at the paragraph with sentence 15, or line 15, this is the paragraph I'm looking for. It says, Congress authorized more money for the Capitol in 1803 and appointed architect Benjamin Latrobe to oversee construction. He had the south wing finished by 1811, but by then the north wing was in need of repair. The War of 1812, which lasted until 1815, intervened and Congress refused to worry about the building project. A frustrated Latrobe resigned. Now it doesn't come out and directly tell us that he was unhappy with Congress, but the word frustrated implies that, and so we can make an inference that he resigned because he was unhappy with Congress's lack of interest. Therefore, D is your correct answer. Okay, now we're going to look at the last multiple choice question on the ACT Aspire exemplar item reading test, and it's number 6. It asks us, what reason, if any, does the passage give for why the north wing of the Capitol was in need of repair in 1811? Now that was in the paragraph that we just read again concerning Latrobe, and looking at it, the only thing that it says is he had the south wing finished by 1811, but by then the north wing was in need of repair. Now it doesn't mention anything about the poor workmanship, which had resulted in weak floors. It doesn't mention the fire and water had damaged the walls. It does not mention anything about damage caused by dust, which had occurred during construction of the south wing. The passage doesn't provide a reason why the north wing needed repair in 1811. Therefore, choice D is the correct answer for number 6 on your exam. And that concludes our look at the ACT Aspire Grade 8 Reading Exemplar items. The main thing to remember when you're looking at these texts is to go back into your text and find the evidence that makes the answer correct. Look at all 4 choices, eliminate the 3, and find the one which has the evidence to prove the correct answer. Okay, in the last part of this lesson, we're going to look at number 7, which would be your open response for the 8th grade ACT Aspire reading. And we're just going to break down the prompt and kind of look at how you would begin to answer the prompt. Now, I've already read the passage to you. Number 7 is asking us to think about the preceding passage as you read the following excerpt. Thornton's design, however brilliant, was not perfect, although the Capitol's exterior was magnificent. Thornton lacked the architect's ability to picture an interior in 3 dimensions. Thus, when professional builders examined his plans, it became clear that its columns were spaced too widely and that the staircases lacked sufficient headroom. The conference room's interior colonnade, Thomas Jefferson objected, will obstruct the view of the members, and if taken away, the ceiling is too wide to support itself. Key sections of the building lacked sufficient light and air. The president's office had no ventilation at all, while the Senate chamber was allotted only 3 windows. However, elements of Thornton's design remain, including the original western facade of the wings, the stately law library door at the southeast corner of the old north wing, and much of the eastern facade. He established for all time what the Capitol was to be. Everything that came later had to follow Thornton's design, says architectural historian William Allen. Adapted from a Capitol vision from a self-taught architect by Fergus M. Bordewick. Okay, the prompt asks us to explain what new information this excerpt from a Capitol vision from a self-taught architect adds to the discussion begun in the passage from a Capitol of the problems involved in building the U.S. Capitol. Using both the passage and the excerpt, provide 3 pieces of evidence to support your answer. Okay, so what we want to think about here is exactly what is it that the prompt is asking us to do. It wants us to talk about what new information is presented in this passage, and then it wants us to discuss the problems involved from this new information. In other words, what new information was presented which really points out the problems involved. Okay? And we're supposed to support our answer by the passage, which is this one, and the new excerpt, which is this one. And what I noticed as I was reading through the new excerpt, first of all, was that it mentions that Thornton's design was not perfect. Now, I want to refresh your memory. Thornton was the winner of the contest, and all he did was design the building. He won a contest, and his design won. But he wasn't really an architect. You notice it says he was a physician, so he didn't exactly know how an architect or architectural design might work. And that was one of the first things it mentioned. Now, when it got into the details, it really pointed out that one problem with his design was that the columns were spaced too widely, and then it pointed out that the staircases lacked sufficient headroom, and the ceiling was too wide to support itself, and there was no ventilation. Now that's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 problems. And I would prove my answer from the excerpt by pointing out at least 3 of these problems, and then I would go over into the excerpt itself and point out that these things were not mentioned in the original passage, because the original passage, the problems were that it was behind schedule. Another problem was that the north wing was in need of repair. The War of 1812 caused a problem. The building was set fire. It took 30 years to construct, and there wasn't enough space. The dome design was too small. And then last was just a brief interruption of the Civil War. So if you look at the problems mentioned here, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it doesn't mention any of these. So in your answer, you would need to choose 3 new problems, quote them from your text, and then go over here and point out that it was not one of the other 7 problems previously mentioned, and that would answer your open response completely looking at the prompt. And this concludes our look at the ACT Aspire Grade 8 Reading Exemplar Items.